So welcome back to another Supabase video. In this particular episode, what we're going to do is we're going to create a profiles table within inside our Supabase project. And what that means is it means that when a user actually registers and creates their account within inside Supabase, we're going to create a profile for them straight away. That's going to allow you to then extend that to contain further details depending on what use case it is for your particular application. We're also going to implement row level security as well. We're going to make sure that only authenticated users and this specific user can actually update that data as well. And of course, I'm going to use FlutterFlow here as an example, but you can use any front end stack for this. The same rules apply. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So the idea with inside my FlutterFlow project is that we are creating an account successfully. Of course, we're actually creating the user with inside Supabase. But what I really would like to do is I would like to actually create an entry with inside a profile table, which I can then add more profile level information at a future point with inside my application. So what we're going to do is we are going to make some changes with inside Supabase to make all of that happen. So that's where the action is. And then we'll come back to FlutterFlow very, very shortly, where I will demonstrate how all of that works. So let's go to Supabase now. So within one of my previous videos on row level security within Supabase, this is exactly where I was. We literally had a single post table within inside our database. We now need to create a brand new table called profile. Let's now do that with inside the actual table editor. Hit the new table option up the top here, just type in profile. We're going to take off row level security just for the moment. Okay, we'll come back to that shortly. And then down here, we now need to create some additional columns for our actual table itself. So we're going to put in here one called display name, and then that's going to be of type text. So just going to contain some simple text there. Hit add column. We're also going to put email in here as well, because it'd be useful to actually include the email address of our user with inside the actual profile table. And of course, you can add more columns in here as your application grows, or whatever you need to put in there, you can go ahead and do that. We do need to make some other changes though. Okay, at the moment, the ID is currently just a primary key indicator. It's going to start from 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We need to change it. We want our ID to be our user ID that actually will be part of this record. Okay, and it's going to be unique, so it's great for a primary key. So we're going to keep ID here. We're just going to change the type though to UUID here. So just choose a UUID, and we now need to create an actual foreign key relationship. We need to connect our user with inside a users table up to this particular table itself here. So of course, if you need to learn more about sort of foreign key relationships, please do go and have a look at the Supabase documentation. Just hit the little option up here, the little sort of link. We need to choose a schema. So choose the auth schema, and then within the table select, we need to choose and just scroll down here to the actual users. Okay, and of course the column that we're now trying to link is actually going to be the ID. So it's got the UUID type, but it's ID within inside this particular table. So just choose that, and of course that's all that we actually need to do. Hit save. And then of course we're now good as gold to then hit the save on here as well, and hopefully, fingers crossed, our table should be created for us. Very good, we've got the table all created, so we're in a good place. So let's move on to the next bit. So next up then, now we've actually got our profile table created, we need to find a way to actually create some profile data. Something needs to happen with inside the database to add an entry into this profile table. So of course that's going to happen when the user actually registers with inside our application, because what will happen is the user will be created with inside Supabase, but at that point that user is registered, we're going to also want to create the entry with inside the profile table. That then sets us up nicely with inside our own application to then manipulate the data within inside that particular profile table. So we now need to configure up a particular function, and that function will be triggered by a trigger, which will then happen, and of course our record will then be created. So let's now go and create that function now within inside the Supabase project. So let's now create our new function. Move over to the left hand side, choose a database, go to functions, and we're going to want to hit this button here called create a new function. Just select that. Now up the top here, we now need to give it a name. So we're going to call this create a profile for new user. The schema is going to remain a public, and the return type is going to be of type trigger. Okay, so just move down now. This is where we now need to focus our attention on the actual definition itself. This is where we need to describe exactly what we want this function to actually do. So of course in Postgres here, in Supabase, we need to always start with a begin and we always need to end with an end. And inside here, this is where we're now going to put our key details. So we're going to say insert into, okay, so we're going to insert into this particular table called public dot profile. We're going to do an open bracket, in fact space there. I'm going to say ID and I'm also going to say email, okay, like that. Hit a return here and I'm going to say values, and these are the actual values that we're going to insert. So of course new is the database record that we've actually got at this particular stage, because of course the insert is going to actually happen after the actual user has actually been created within inside the users table. Okay, so we've got hold of that. So we've got hold of the ID, and then we also now need to say new.email to get access to the actual email address as well. So just a little semicolon at the end of that on the values, and then down here we just need to simply say return new. So just going to sort of continue the actual function at that particular stage. So quite simply then we're just going to insert into our profiles table with the ID of the user. This is the user ID and the email address, and of course values are just specifying them in the correct order. You just need to make sure that these are actually in order here, and return new. And that's all that we need to do here. Now we just need to just go down here now, a few extra little steps here. We need to go to show advanced settings, and just down here we need to make a little tweak just down here. So these are all the same, that's no problem at all, but we need to choose the security definer. Okay, so again please do refer back to the documentation for more sort of deeper dive information into this particular section here. But if you had security invoker set, then you'll probably find that actually your database record wouldn't be created. So just make sure that you do security definer. Now that's all that we need to do for our function. Just hit confirm and fingers crossed it will be created, which it is. So of course it's great that we've got a function. The function needs to be invoked, and this is where we now need to then focus our attention on actually creating the trigger. So let's hop over and let's work on the trigger now. Okay, so let's move over to the triggers option here. Choose triggers within inside the database section. Don't worry about these particular ones that's actually already set by the system. We're not really worried about them. Hit the create a new trigger up here. Let's just put a name in here of create profile on startup. Now the table that we need to actually create the trigger on is of course going to be the users table. Okay, so when something happens, which in our case is going to be an insert of a brand new record, that's the table that we're looking for. Okay, so just select that, scroll down to the bottom here and you'll see one called users auth. Just choose that, and of course you need to check the insert because it's any operation that is related to an insert here. We're going to do the trigger. Now the trigger type is going to be after the event, so actually the user is going to be created within inside the database, and then of course once that's created we're going to get a hold of that particular record, and of course we want to make sure that we now actually call the function actually after that user has been created inside the users table. Now the orientation here we need to change to a row, and then down here we actually now need to choose the actual trigger that we're going to sort of kick off, and of course it's going to be the create profile for a new user. Just choose that, and then that is all that we need to do. Just hit the confirm, and we should see there that our trigger is now being called. That is fantastic. Let's now go and test this out with inside Supabase to see if we actually get a profile record created with inside our table with inside Supabase directly by creating the user within Supabase. Let's go and do that now. So all we've got to do is go over to the authentication option here on the left hand side. We've got users already selected up here. You can see I've got no users in my database at all. If I go to add user, go to create a new user, and I'm just going to type in here the digital pro at outlook.com. I'm just going to put any old password in here, 1 2 3 4 5 6, just for good measure. Just say create user, and that is all looking good for us. It looks like we got our user created. Now the question is have we got our sort of profile created? So let's go to the actual table editor. Let's go to profile. Kaboom, there we go. We got our user ID, which is now our primary key within inside our database. We've got the email address, and we've got a timestamp here of when that user is created. So excellent, that's perfect. We've got everything in place now, of course, in terms of actually causing that, making that trigger to actually do what we want it to do. Let's now move on to the next bit now and focus our attention on actually locking down these particular database tables. Let's go and do that now. So if you've not seen my previous video inside my channel on actual row level security within inside Supabase, please do go and check that video. It's got lots of good information in there on securing your database using row level security. But we're going to quickly introduce that in this particular video as well. So I hope you will find this of interest. Of course, our profile table is great. Our post table inside this particular database is all locked down using row level security, but our profile table is not. We at this moment in time have a very open table. Of course, if somebody was to kind of get hold of our keys, our API keys, they can actually invoke our database via an API and they can pull down information. We don't want that to happen. We only want authenticated users, and certainly more importantly, we only want the actual user of themselves to actually only access the data that they're entitled to see, of course, which was based on the user ID. So we need to put some policies in place. We need to enable row level security first, but then we're going to implement some policies on our profile table. So let's go and quickly do that. So here we are on the profile table. We just need to quite simply click up here and say RLS is not enabled. Just choose that, of course, and then we're going to say enable RLS and just hit confirm. So we now know that our database table right now is completely locked up. Okay, we can't now publicly access the information sort of inside it. Okay, so we now need to open up to certain individuals, which in our case is going to be our users. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to actually create some policies now for this particular profile table. So the first policy that we're going to actually create is going to be more around accessing, just from a more read-only perspective, this particular data of inside this table. So just choose the new policy option up the top right, hit for the kind of, we don't use a template in this particular case here. We just need to put a new sort of title in here. I'm going to say can only view own profile data. Of course, the allowed operation is going to be a select. It's just going to be a query into that particular database. We don't need to make any changes here, but we do need to put this using expression in. And let me just paste something in here and I'll just talk you through it. Okay. So if you see my previous video on row level security, I really did go into quite some depth actually on what all this means, but just quite simply in this particular video, we've got this JWT token, this secure token that is passed in on the request actually into our database. Okay, now with inside that, we've actually got a value in there which actually contains the user ID, okay, which is text. So this is what this sub text is. Okay, it's a piece of text. It's the sub the sort of the name within inside that JWT token that we're lifting out. So we actually have the user ID pass in at this particular point, and we're saying here, does it equal the ID within this particular database table? So of course, if you remember when we create our policies, our profile table, we actually had that primary key called ID. So here what we're doing is we're just saying, is the token that with the user ID passed in matching the ID, the primary key of this particular table? Of course, in our case, that would be true. So this will return back a true, which means that the operation is now allowed within inside this particular table. So this is all that we need to do. So if I just hit the review option here, this will just give you a bit of an overview of the statement that's actually going to be executed within inside Supabase. Hit the save policy and everything should be golden for us. We've now got that policy. So our profile table is now allowing select operations for that particular user on this particular table. Okay, so certainly if we have a record there with the ID, then that should be returned back to the user. So really good from that perspective. But of course, select is not enough for us. We need to also provide the ability for our users to actually update the data that they're entitled to update as well. So of course, because this row automatically gets created when a new user registers in our application, we're going to want to update the data of inside that database table. So we might want to update the display name or anything like that. So of course that's going to be linked via the actual user ID. So we need to create a brand new policy. So choose new policy up here. Choose the option down the bottom here. And of course what we're going to do is just going to put another name in here now. So it can only update own profile data, of course. Now we just need to choose the update option. And then with down inside these using expressions, we're just going to put basically the same thing in there again as we did previously. So we've got the same statement in there. We've got the just the check there to make sure that the IDs match up with the actual token that's actually passed in. Just hit the review here. Just hit the save policy, and that is created successfully. So let's now test this out. Now I'm going to go over to FlutterFlow now to actually test this out with inside our updated project. Let's go and do that now. So here I am in run mode with inside a FlutterFlow project. This is just a straightforward, pretty well much almost out of the box sort of sign up screen with inside FlutterFlow here. I'll just key some details in there as a new user. Let's hit the create account option. Magic, our account has been created. Let's flip over to Supabase there. We can see the row is just landed with inside our profiles table, which is fantastic. Now I want to update this display name here, so I'll just put that in here really just as a quick exercise with inside our project to actually do that. So I've got this option down the bottom here called profile. Just select that. I've got this very simple profile screen that just loads up. I'm just going to type in my name here, Steve, and then hit the little option here to save it. If I go back into the database, you can see now that display name has now been added. So of course, as I said on the almost at the beginning of the video, you can create as many columns as you like now with inside this profile table, depending on what your use case is with inside your application, of course. So that's fantastic. So just as a quick bonus, at the time of recording, FlutterFlow itself does not support any kind of the social media logins, but if you're implementing these features with inside Supabase for your own project that is maybe authenticating and signing up users via a social media platform, what you can also do is there's a little tweak you can make to the actual function that we've got here, where you should be able to then pull in the actual the user name actually as the display name actually when the user actually creates their user account. Okay, and the way that you do that is if you just go actually in and actually edit the actual function itself, we can make a little change here. We can say display underscore name like that, and then on one of the values, if you just do a little comma here and then you paste this in as well, you can say that the raw user metadata is actually then pointing to the actual username itself. Now chances are that actually with inside the actual the users table, there's going to be some raw data, some raw JSON data that you can actually hook onto, and that's called raw user metadata. Now with inside that, it's highly likely that you're actually going to have the username of the actual user. So what you can do is you can actually put that in here that will actually then pass that across as the display name with inside your profile table. Now of course I'm a FlutterFlow user. I primarily use a Supabase within FlutterFlow, of course, but that might be a really handy technique at the time of recording if you're using this in other sort of platforms. But of course this will also come into fruition when FlutterFlow does actually support social media logins as well. So just a little quick tip there that you might want to include in your own projects. So just hit confirm and that should all update for us, and that should be good to go. And of course you can put that in there right now. It won't have any effect with inside your project. It will probably just it would just be null, so don't worry too much about that. But that's pretty well much it. So there you go. Thank you for watching this particular episode. Of course, if you are interested in the FlutterFlow project, please do check the link in the description. Of course, you're going to make sure that if you clone that particular project, you're going to want to make sure you pass your API key and all that kind of stuff into FlutterFlow. And of course, we want to bring in the actual schema as well once that's actually created inside Supabase. So of course, if you love the no-code space and you love watching these type of walkthrough videos, I'd love to have you part of the community. Please do subscribe to my channel, and most importantly, if you're watching this video, please do hit the like button. I really do appreciate your likes on the video. It gets out to the wider community who will also then enjoy this content. So until the next video, I'll see you soon.